It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. It is great to be with you here today. And, also, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. We got a great show for you here today on Agronomic Monday. Now, Peter Johnson will not be with us here today. We gave him a week off. He is like busy with his corn harvest, and he's also in this play. So I you know what, I'm taking it easy on him. I said, Pete, you get the Monday off, and so so we're going to focus on a number of the other conversations that our team at Real Agriculture has had from an agronomic perspective. And I'll say this. There is no other media company in North America that has more agronomic coverage. Nobody has more than we do. If you look at all the crop schools that we're producing on a regular basis, that's 150 episodes just right there. Okay? So, yeah, like just not even close. Plus all the other stuff that we're doing. It's amazing. I like to brag about it because we're very proud about it at Real Agriculture. So today we're going to talk to Meagen Reed. She is the agronomy manager with Saskatchewan Pulse Growers. Going to talk about Aphanomyces and the impact it is having on the pulse acre. You know, this is something that I deem very, very important. And we did a great video shoot with a farmer from Montana and a retailer in Plentywood. And that video on YouTube has got a ton of views and some amazing drone footage of the impact of what Aphanomyces has had on that lentil stand in that field that I was standing in. But today, Meagen Reed is going to talk about from a Saskatchewan perspective and some of the management principles and all that kind of stuff. So looking forward to that. Cornie Thiessen is going to be here from ADAMA Canada. They've got a new fungicide that's coming out into the market for 2024. And so that product spotlight's pretty darn important. We're then going to talk, we're going to play some audio for you, from a recent Soil School episode. And Bernd Tobin is going to really dive into the topic of the soil type. So how much, let's just say, like how much clay you have and how that has an impact on the availability of the potassium and how that all relates back to the soil test and understanding your soil type and all those kinds of things as we're making sure potassium is very, very important, one of the nutrients. So we got to pay attention to that as well, on top of what we're doing with N and P and some of the micros. So good stuff there. That's a recent Soil School episode. And then we're going to finish up with Dr. Dave Hooker, who's going to talk about how rotation impacts yield and crop resilience. That's also an interview that Bernd Tobin did. And really looking there as well, part of that is the impact that wheat has on that the overall yield potential of that rotation, not just on the wheat crop, of course, but also the impact it has on some of the other crops that are in that rotation, especially following the wheat, indeed. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. Encourage you to check out our YouTube channel, where we have a lot of that agronomic content. Also, all of the Agritechnica coverage as well. So check that out. Our Real Agriculture YouTube channel is I think there's 50,000 subscribers. So make sure you subscribe and like all the videos and all those kinds of things, like all the YouTubers tell you to do. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Now, speaking of Agritechnica, I thought I would do something here today. As I've told you, my daughter Rylan was on the trip with us to Agritechnica in Germany. She ran one of the cameras. And listen, after she ran around with Bernd Tobin we divided two teams. It was Jay Strovey and I, and then it was Bernd Tobin and Rylan. And after watching Bernd do his thing, and Bernd's a true professional when it comes to videos, did a great job on his half of the Agritechnica coverage, we said, you know what, Rylan? Time to step it up. That's right. And you need to get in front of the camera. And so we made her do a report from it was the farming simulator competition. And she did a report on why the farming simulator competition is important, not just at Agritechnica, but how the game kind of brings people together inside and out of the industry. Here's that report.
Hi everyone, it's Shaun Haney with RealAgriculture at Agritechnica 2023 in Hanover, Germany. We're here at the Farming Simulator League competition building, which is happening on Friday. Farming Simulator is a game, and in the competition it's all about bale stacking, and the winner actually wins 200,000 euros, which is a lot of money, a lot of money. But games like Farming Simulator are great because they're played by people in the industry at all ages, but also kids or adults who aren't in the agriculture industry, so it really connects them to agriculture in ways that they haven't been before. I personally also really like games like Farming Simulator, like Heyday. For example, I love Heyday. I'm on level 36, and I play it all the time. So games like this are great, but yeah, it's a huge competition here, so big that people are coming from all over the world to compete for the Farming Simulator League Championship. And once again, we want to thank Optimum Gly and Corteva Agriscience for sponsoring us here at Agritechnica 2023. I'm Shaun Haney with Real Agriculture.
Well, if that's not a proud dad moment, I don't know what is. She did great. That was one take, by the way. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
Picture this. You've just taken a photo that really celebrates agriculture and your community. Why not share it with the Lalman Hometown Roots Photo Contest for a chance to support your community with $5,000. Lalman is a family-owned company that supports growers with products like Lalfix Start Spherical Pulses and Lalfix Pro Yield Liquid Soybean. Visit LalmanHometownRoots.com for more information.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground. We are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday. This segment's brought to you by Optimum Gly, new canola trait technology from Corteva Agriscience. Also, of course, the sponsor of our coverage of Agritechnica that you can find by going to RealAgriculture.com. Make sure you subscribe to our machinery email. That's the best place to make sure you don't miss any of that coverage. You can find that by going to RealAgriculture.com/subscribe. We're now going to dive into really a topic that is very, very critical for the pulse growing regions of Canada and, quite frankly, the northern tier of the United States as well. Recently, on a Pulse School episode that is brought to you by BASF Canada, Lindsay Smith had a chance to catch up with Meagen Reed. She's the agronomy specialist with Saskatchewan Pulse Growers, talking about Aphanomyces. Yes, and some of the dramatic impacts it has on yields in Saskatchewan. And is there anything we can do about it?
Welcome to the Pulse School here on RealAgriculture.com. I've got with me now Meagen Reed. She's the agronomy manager with Saskatchewan Pulse Growers. Hello, Meagen.
Hi, Lindsay. Thank you for having me.
Well, I am told, and I am so glad there is someone who has this title, that you have all the things we need to know about Aphanomyces. And maybe that's a pretty tall order. But let's start with, so Aphanomyces, what is the scope of this problem for pulse growers in Saskatchewan?
The scope of this problem, so pea and lentil acres are our large acre pulse crops that we grow in the province. And there isn't an acre essentially that is resistant or is unaffected, I would say, by Aphanomyces root rot. And so it's far-reaching. It is causing significant economic losses to our growers, and it is causing We've seen a decline in pulse acres over the last number of years. And I think largely in part, I mean, there are other issues, but one of the key drivers for that is trying to manage Aphanomyces, because we don't have a lot of options for management, and rotation management is one of the only things we have right now.
Mm-hmm. But that rotation, so let's maybe go through sort of what the plan is ahead of any growing season, but this one in particular. But ahead of any growing season, what is sort of the list that you're going through of, you know, the options we do have for trying to manage this disease?
Yeah, so for a grower or an agronomist, if I'm sitting here at this time of year, it's November, we're starting to do rotation planning. What we really know so far about this disease is it's complex, and we actually call it part of the root rot complex. So it's multifaceted, but it really comes down to basic agronomics. And so having a really good fertility package is showing to have some, you know, just general plant health benefits. We know this, but also gives the plant an ability to be a little bit more resilient. So start with a good fertility package. I would look at your disease testing on your seed lot. So do a full disease profile, get your germ and vigor. Seed-borne diseases are part of this root rot complex that also can aggravate Aphanomyces infections like Fusarium. So make sure that you know what those levels are. Use a seed treatment. I know there are some pulse acres out there, pea and lentil, that don't get seed treated. I would highly recommend, if you're putting in pea or lentil, seed treat. And there are some products on the market that do offer suppression of Aphanomyces on their label under low risk situations. So if you are at all concerned, look at that. There are also commercial labs available that do offer soil testing that can give you an idea of a yes/no of whether you have Aphanomyces oospores in your soil. And so I would recommend growers collect their soil and then submit it for a bait test. And this is important, not just a bulk soil test, but a bait test. So what happens is they take that soil, they saturate it, plant a little pea or lentil seedling in it, let it sit there for 7 days, and then do a DNA extraction from the tissue of the seedling, and gives a more accurate read because that host plant is there.
Right. This is one of the things that's sort of fascinating about this disease and just the root rot complex in general, is that that's just it. We might get a yes, no, is it there or is it not? But it doesn't necessarily give us a severity test, right? That's
one of the things that we're lacking right now. And there's a ton of ongoing work and research in this area. Dr. Shama Chatterton is one of the leads in root rot research in general, and she's put a lot of effort into and continuing to work in this area. But that is one of the things that is on our radar as a crop commodity group and industry-wide, just looking at developing qualitative and quantitative soil tests to help give producers a better idea to be able to evaluate what their risk level is outside of just managing rotation.
Right. And then let's just quickly touch on, so you did touch on that we do have some suppression in some products. And in general, again, it's a complex. So the healthier you can keep that plant. Right. And there are other root rots that we have to worry about too. So you have to have an option, right? But it is also one that can show up a bit later if we've got wet conditions. So we know that pea and lentil are really susceptible compared to others. Are we talking 1 in 6 years, 1 in 8 years? Is there a rule of thumb?
Honestly, it depends on a lot of things. So the number of times you've had pea or lentil in rotation in the last, how often? So if you were running 1 in 3, and the last couple times you grew them, you had really wet soil and your yields declined, you might be looking at 6 to 8 years. You could be looking at 10. There are growers in the province that are at 10 years rotation on pea and lentil right now. This past year, we saw some pretty heavy rain events, particularly in that Rosetown area, and guys who hadn't had pea or lentil in their soil since 2016. Just happened to have, so it was a wet year in 2016, root rot was the charts. They hadn't put anything in since then. And then this year they put it in. It was a 7-year, 8-year rotation, and they got hit again. Yeah, because those oospores, those resting spores, are so long-lived.
Yeah. How important is it then in season to scout for and identify Aphanomyces? If you think that's what it is, how important is that?
Yeah, so it comes back to managing your rotation going out. Once the crop's in the ground, and once you're starting to see impacts of disease, there's nothing we can do. There's no product you can apply. Okay. It's kind of a done deal at that point. But in order to inform your future decision making, it's really important. So if you, we get to middle of June, end of June, seed treatment's worn off, get some heavy rains, and crop's not looking super healthy, go out and dig some plants, dig up some roots. And if there's browning or that honey-colored distinctive Aphanomyces infection color, or a really dark brown, almost black, that could be fusarium, I would highly suggest collecting those plant samples and sending them into a lab that can do a DNA extraction and get confirmation on what pathogens are present. And then when it comes back to that rotation again, it's not only important just to look at when was the last time we had a pure lentil in, but what were the conditions when that pure lentil was grown. Because if it was a dry year, you didn't build that spore load in the soil. So there's less risk, but that's a key part of that, is assessing the environmental conditions the last time.
Okay. So there is an app that farmers could use. So tell me about this, Meagen.
So Dr. Steve Shitliff from the University of Saskatchewan has developed a platform. I'm not sure how the functionality is on a mobile phone as of yet. It's still in progress, but he has launched it online. And so growers can actually go on. It's called AREA. So Aphanomyces Risk Evaluation App. Oh, shortens for AREA. Yeah,
I like it.
What a grower can do is go online and plug in their land location, find their piece of land. This is really important also for guys who are renting land or picking up new land, and they want to know what the risk is. And it will pull the crop history data and then do an evaluation and give you a risk of low, moderate, or high risk for Aphanomyces if you were to plant the next year. Right. So pairing that with rotation planning, soil bait testing, seed testing, these are the things that we have as tools right now that growers can utilize, and then just good basic agronomics, where we're at with everything.
Yes. And so it's a really good point you bring up, though, and I'm really glad that this app even is coming into existence and being used, because if you're missing records, so whether you're picking up land that isn't, familiar to you, or whether you've lost your records or didn't keep records, especially if you're in a 6 or 8 year rotation, that can be that one more piece of the puzzle to try and put that risk profile together. So, really great. Okay.
That was Lindsay Smith talking to Meagen Reed. She's the agronomy manager. I said agronomy specialist, agronomy manager with Saskatchewan Pulse Growers. Aphanomyces, definitely something that we have got to find more solutions for. And it's a devastating disease. There is just no question about it. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we've got a product spotlight coming up with ADAMA Canada. Cornie Thiessen will be with us right after this. You're listening to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers.
What were the issues in your fields this year? Did you do a soil sample? What is your soil sample telling you about some of the nutrient issues that you might be having going into next year? What herbicides did you use? What residues you might be concerned about? What weed issues did you have? What crop residues did you have? How well do you know your fields?
Get the answers to all the questions you have about your pulse crop at the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight with ADAMA Canada. And we're joined right now by the General Manager for Canada at ADAMA. It is Cornie Thiessen. Cornie, great to chat with you.
Good to chat with you, Shaun.
Okay, so now, since we last spoke, ADAMA Canada has really been on the aggressive hunt looking for a single fungicide product that could do something that really no other products in Canada in this category have really been able to do or claim. And I've heard that we've got a new product, a new fungicide with ADAMA Canada, and it's called Maxentis. Tell us about it.
That's right, Shaun. Yeah, Maxentis is a new fungicide product for Canada. So it's a unique dual mode action product, and it's the first of its kind to combine these two active ingredients. It's also unique in that it is a great fit for pulses, canola, and soybeans. So good cross spectrum for across crops, dual mode of action technology.
So give us some more of the details. How is it going to help Canadian growers?
Well, we've had a chance to test this in the lab, in the field, and then with farmers. And we've seen really good performance from a yield enhancement, very strong disease protection. I think one of the technicians that we worked with to validate the technology used the term stronger and longer in terms of disease protection. And that's from a combination of, these two active ingredients work really well together. So we're getting both that early response and then also good longevity in terms of protection and plant health. And the formulation type using the Azorbital 2 technology is a real step forward for us. It's an EC, so it'll allow us to offer bulk packages. The farmers who tried it this last year really enjoyed how it mixed and easy rinsing. They even like the smell of it. So it's something that I think farmers will really like the performance, but they'll also really like the convenience of its use.
So, Cornie, very interesting. Do you anticipate that this product has the ability to change the ag market, alter it a little bit in Canada? Like, talk about that.
Well, I think one of the unique things about this is obviously we're looking for the ability to enhance yield, and that's something that's really important. But we also know that for farmers, they need a full toolbox to preserve that diversified, profitable crop rotation that we work so hard to build in Western Canada. And we know that resistance and regulations are starting to take away some of those existing tools. So it's imperative that we keep showing innovation in these new tools to not only protect these diversified crop rotations, but allow us to continue to move the yield needle forward. And so this is a tool that we think really does that, particularly because of that unique flexibility to work across crops, giving farmers, again, that operational flexibility.
Yeah, it's really about protecting that plant, right? You're really protecting it from the diseases that are trying to rob that plant and of potential yield and knock it off that optimum yield curve. It's really about that.
It is. And there's a couple of pieces of it. Obviously, we want a strong resistance management element to it. We want to be able to make sure that we have maximize the window of control. And we want to ensure that we're giving that consistent performance, because for Canadian farmers, I think that's been one of those things that in certain crops, they've really been longing for something that is going to give that more consistent ROI from a disease protection standpoint. And we do think getting that right mix of active ingredients and then unlocking the opportunity with formulation technology, we think we can really show that increased ROI consistency for farmers that allows us to move the yield and productivity forward.
Well, really exciting news. The product is Maxentis. Cornie, if somebody wants more information on Maxentis, where do they find it?
Yeah, they can certainly go to our website, but I think probably a better place is to go to your local full-service retail. We've just got registration for this product, and we are rolling it out to all of our retails. And those frontline retailers will do a great job of helping explain how it can work for the local farmer conditions.
Yeah, great stuff. In the market for 2024, so get a jump on this one for sure, everybody. Cornie, thanks so much for joining us here today on RealAg Radio for this product spotlight.
Thanks so much.
When we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to feature a new soil school episode talking about how clay content impacts your K availability. You're listening to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday. We'll be back right after this.
When it comes to your farm, you demand performance, because what goes in determines what comes out. At Pride Seeds, we deliver on performance. With best-in-class corn hybrid seed, you'll see results when it comes to premium yields in all the ways that matter. Moisture, nutrition, dollars per acre, and of course, tonnage. So discover your farm's advantage, the Pride Seeds advantage. Visit your local dealer or prideseeds.com today.
You know, there's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcasts today.
Over the years, we've produced a number of different schools at RealAgriculture.com. I talk about, the different crop schools that we have going. One of the most successful schools that we have, and I think because it appeals to everybody. I don't care what crop you are growing. In fact, I don't care if you're even raising livestock and you got pasture. You're interested in soil health. And so we've got a soil school. Now, it's brought to you by the Mosaic Company. I encourage you to go to RealAgriculture.com. Search Soil School, and you're going to find all the great episodes. We've got some really, really great experts from across Canada and the United States talking about their expertise and really this whole idea about the soil. Because, and I know, listen, there's a whole bunch of talk right now about soil health, but a lot of you have been dealing with this and thinking about it and trying to improve the quality of your soil for a very long time. Even before it was very much a buzzword of any sort, okay? So now what we're going to do is let's turn it over to Bern Tobin of Real Agriculture, talking about how clay has an impact on the availability of your potassium.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin. Welcome to the Soil School. Today, we're going to talk potassium, one of our big three nutrients. With some great insights from my guest, Plant Nutrition Canada Chief Scientist Tom Bruulsema, we're going to dig into how K is available in the soil, the impact your soil's clay content can have on the nutrients availability, and how to best sample and test K levels in your soil. So Tom, let's kick this off at 50,000 feet. In 2020, 44% of soils tested in North America tested below the critical level for potassium. Now, what does that mean in terms of impact on crop production?
Well, yes, the survey across North America that we did of the soil test labs, we just looked at all the soil test labs that came in from the labs that cooperated and shared information. And of them, 44% tested below the critical level, which meant that that soil, if not fertilized with potassium, you could expect the crop would have been losing yield. So there's no direct impact because we presume that most people who had those low test levels were actually fertilizing.
Tom, what does that test mean for farmers? Do we need to be topping up our K levels?
Well, if you have a test that's below critical, you can still operate. You can still often get pretty good yields. The one thing you can't do is skip an application without consequences. And so if you want to do that, you probably would be looking at trying to build your soil test potassium or maintain it at a level at least a little bit above the critical.
Now let's talk about availability. How much potassium do we have in our soils, Tom, and how much is actually available to the plant?
Soil minerals contain a huge amount of potassium, like 20,000 pounds an acre or so, or 20,000 parts per million, compared to the couple hundred that you might see on your soil test report. Ontario median soil test level is about 140, just above critical. That's a very small proportion of the total in the soil. But what is reported on your soil test is an estimate of the available fraction.
So Tom, when it comes to nutrient removal, how much K are we actually taking off a field when we harvest corn, soybeans and wheat?
Well, there are substantial amounts taken out by each crop, and actually soybeans take, surprisingly, sometimes they're the biggest removers of potassium. Potassium in a plant is usually mostly in the vegetative part rather than in the grain. But even corn, a 200 bushel corn crop, will remove 40 pounds of K2O in the grain. If you're harvesting it as silage, you could be removing 5 times that, like 200 pounds per acre. So that's something to really be considering in terms of maintaining your soil test level. What you take out does need to be replaced in most cases.
So let's talk about soil type and availability. How can your soil makeup, Tom, specifically that amount of clay in your soil, impact available K, and how do you read your soil test?
That's a great question, Bernard, and there's recent research on that has changed potassium recommendations in various parts of North America. For example, in North Dakota, the research found that the different types of clays in the soil there behave differently with respect to potassium. There are dozens of types of clays when we look at the minerals in soils, but they get broadly classed into 2 groups, smectites and illites. In Ontario we have a lot of illites, but there may be some that have higher levels of smectite. What they found in North Dakota is that soils that were higher in smectite had a lower critical level than soils that were dominated by illites. So their recommendations, they've come up with maps now of the state, and you need to know where your farm is on that map to know what your critical level is. We don't have that yet in Ontario, but clay can affect the availability of potassium in your soil, particularly, of course, in the high clay soils.
Let's talk about soil moisture and wetness. How does that impact potassium availability?
It's particularly with the soil-water interaction that the clay comes in, because smectite soils, they shrink and swell in response to wetting and drying. And as they shrink and swell, the spaces between the sheets of clay, they open up and close down, and that may release or trap potassium. It can be hard to predict. It's hard to generalize that, in a dry soil, does it all disappear? We're not sure of that. When you get too wet in a soil, you get a change in the reduction status of the soil, and that again changes the charges on the edges of the clays. And when you get that happening, you may have also a higher frequency of deficiencies. Research by Tony Vine about 20 years ago looked at potassium status in no-till soils. And what he found was that both tilled soils and no-till soils, they respond to potassium, but there were larger responses to band-applied potassium in the no-till soils.
Tom, when it comes to uptake, what factors promote or inhibit K uptake in the crop?
Sure. For the plant to take up potassium, it's an energy-driven process, so the roots need oxygen. So you need good soil aeration, but you also need moisture. Potassium holds on to the cation exchange surfaces in the soil, so it moves very slowly. It moves by diffusion. A plant needs a good, extensive root system if it's going to take up large amounts of potassium. So you need a plant that grows good roots. You need good moisture. You need good aeration. And under those conditions, you get good uptake. Those are the main factors.
Let's talk about soil testing for K. There are a whole host of variables to consider here. Let's start with timing. What's the best time to sample if you want to get a good read on potassium?
Well, the best time to take a soil sample is when you can get a good sample. And that means not too wet, not too dry, often after harvest of your main crop, at the same point in the rotation each time. That's roughly when you want to sample. You can sample in the fall, you can sample in the spring, but it's important that you be able to take a good sample, not fight with the soil to get it out.
Final question, Tom, and that is, what other factors should growers and agronomists, consider when testing for K in their soil?
Other factors for testing, test consistently. A consistent depth is very important, particularly since our tillage does not invert the soil like it used to with moldboard plows. Depth is critical. We recommend 6 inches in Ontario. You need enough cores. The recommended standard is 20 cores to represent 25 acres. Some people will go to more intensively and go with a grid sample where you're representing every 2.5 acres with a soil sample. That's great, and sampling by zones is probably one of the better approaches. The critical key there is defining your zones.
Hey Tom, some great insights. I really appreciate you making some time for Soil School.
That was Bern Tobin talking to Tom Bruulsema about the relation of soil type and clay amounts to availability of potassium, and some really, really important key points there. You can find more episodes like what you just heard of the Soil School by going to realagriculture.com/soil-school. Okay, so that's where you find it. And some great episodes like making cover cropping work in northern Minnesota, how Axton Farms is loyal to their soil, reading the layers of a field soil profile, all that, and a whole lot more. Interesting, when we talk about soil tests, I really find that everybody has a little bit of a different strategy there on the frequency, how you're doing it. What we just heard there is, the difference between grids versus zones. The zone method, I'm no expert on this whatsoever, but I think more people have been moving to the zone. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let me know what you're doing and how you're doing it when it comes to your strategy around soil testing. It is the fall. This is the time where we start to see a lot of people before that ground freezes up doing some of that kind of soil testing. Indeed, to really kind of lay that plan for next year. Now, if you are going to be going through the cost of a soil test, critical. This might actually be like, what is he talking about? But I think there's a lot of people that do the soil test and then read it, interpret it, have somebody advise them, and then kind of don't necessarily follow some of that. It's just like, well, that's kind of here's what we always do. And, the price of fertilizer at this time doesn't really warrant that kind of a strategy. And some of you are taking it to, like, I am blown away by how some of you take your nutrient strategy and that soil test and the variable rate and some of the mapping and some of the plant, like it's out of this world. Yeah, but not everybody's there. And I guess the key is no matter where you are in terms of your strategy when it comes to nutrient management, there's always room for improvement, right? It doesn't matter where you are. You could be the most advanced you could be the number one nutrient management farmer in all the country. I'm not sure I would come up with that rating, but let's just say you are. There's probably some areas there where you can improve, no different than if you were maybe the worst on the bottom of the pendulum. Okay, let's take a break. And, hey, if you do have feedback on any of that, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. When we come back, we're going to hear from Dr. Dave Hooker, and he's going to talk about how rotation impacts yield and crop resilience, mainly when we're talking about corn, beans, and wheat. You're listening to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture. We're going to dive into our conversation with Dr. Dave Hooker. But first, I want to mention Blackhawk Evo from New Farm. Blackhawk Evo is the next evolution in pre-seed burn-down herbicides. Powered by Duplasn, Blackhawk Evo delivers fast, flexible, and complete control of early germinating and winter annual broadleaf weeds. Make sure you check it out and find out more by going to newfarm.ca. Okay, let's dive into Burn Tobin's discussion with Dr. Dave Hooker, talking about the power of rotation and how that builds crop. It has a major positive impact when it comes to yield. So let's hear what Dr. Dave Hooker has to say.
Today, I'm down in Ridgetown, Ontario, at the Ridgetown campus of University of Guelph at Diagnostic Days, and I'm joined by University of Guelph professor Dave Hooker. Dave, how's it going?
Yeah, going great.
Awesome. Hey, now, we are in the middle, standing here, of the 25-year long-term rotational trials, and really an amazing accomplishment to keep this going for 25 years. Dave, tell us a little bit about the history and what's going on in this site.
Yeah, well, actually, it's not 25, actually, it's 28. But that's good. It's good. So it started in 1995. We have 2 tillage systems compared here. No-till or a quasi-no-till versus conventional. 7 crop rotations. And then in the wheat and corn phases, we have 4 rates of nitrogen. So if you multiply all those numbers up, 56 treatments, and then it's replicated each one is replicated 4 times. So we have close to 300 plots here.
And some amazing data. And Dave, we were talking about, rotation and the impact that it can make on crops, but you got to be patient. You said it takes time for rotational changes to impact your cropping system.
Yeah, that's right, Bern. We have short-term changes, and so if we do something drastic to let's say a cropping system, if you're a conventional till person and you switch to no-till, obviously there's going to be some change. We have some short-term changes, but there are also many long-term changes, and that's what this trial is all about. We call this a long-term experiment, so we can look at those changes that can answer some of those long-term questions. And how long does it take to change? Well, we have, depending on what we have or what we're looking at in the soil, quite often we say, it could take something like a tillage change. A drastic tillage change could take between 15 and 18 years for that system to stabilize or equilibrate. And so that's why we need these long-term trials.
Now, Dave, you had a couple of questions today about, yield plateau. Are crop yields plateauing? And you said, it all depends, and it's a little different story in a rotation system.
Yeah, that's right. I'd be happy to talk about that. I hear lots of terms like plateauing, and it makes me chuckle a little bit just to hear plateau, because I guess it depends on how you define plateau. It's just like defining dead. How dead is it? Is it kind of dead? Is it a little bit dead? So our crops are yielding higher and higher every year. It doesn't matter what crop rotation that we're in. There is a small yield increase, and that's really attributed to advances in plant breeding. But we know that in some cropping systems, because again, this is a long-term experiment, we can look at these trends. We know that in some cropping systems, that plateau or the rate of yield increase is not quite as high on some rotations versus another. Right. And continuous soybeans, for instance, that rate of soybean yield increase with continuous soybeans, there's a little bit of increase there, probably due to advances in plant breeding, but it's not as high, or the increase is not as high, let's say, as a soybeans on a corn, soybean, wheat rotation. And we can say the same thing with corn as well. Right. On a corn, soybean, wheat rotation, that rate of yield increase year-by-year basis is increasing, or is higher compared to, let's say, a continuous corn system.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk more about wheat. This I know is one of your favorite rotational crops. And tell us a little bit about, and we've talked about it in the past, but the impact that wheat can make on the rotation and the yield in those crops.
Yeah, like you said, we talked a lot about it in the past, but we talk a lot about it just because it is such a great story, that wheat has. And Peter Johnson, he just loves the story. Joanna Fallings loves the story as well, because of course they're involved more, like a lot in wheat. They love wheat, as I do as well. But wheat has tremendous capabilities of increasing the yield of corn and soybean, let's say in a corn, soybean, wheat rotation. And so I always tell my students, I tell growers when I stand in front of them, when they're making a decision to plant wheat, we really have to give wheat the credit for the higher soybean yields that we get with wheat in the rotation and higher corn yields. And with soybean yields, we're looking at about 5 bushel per acre, more soybean yields when we have wheat in the rotation. And corn, it varies between 6 and 17 bushel per acre. And usually in the hot, dry years, that's where we see the biggest yield increases, but those are averages.
Because that was my next question. The impact that we can make from a resilience perspective when we get into those tough years.
Yeah, that's right. And so I don't know about you, Bern, but I like to meet my income to be relatively stable, right? I don't want Mother Nature to play with my income. And a lot of farmers, they don't like that as well. Just from the views on Twitter, like, I wish it would rain. When are we going to get some rain or too much rain? Like, nobody likes that. We want a system that's more resilient against these curveballs that Mother Nature keeps throwing at us. And we know that in a rotation where we have, especially wheat in the rotation, we have more resilient, our crops are more resilient in those kinds of rotations.
Hey, final thing, and you mentioned it takes time to sort of to see how change impacts throughout a rotation. You've added strip till here in the not so distant past, and you're seeing the difference that can make. Tell us about that.
Yeah, exactly. So if I was a grower, I am a grower, and I just love the strip till system because it mitigates some of these, effects that planting corn into no-till with no tillage into fairly heavy soil. So this is a Brookston clay loam here. So if I was a grower, I would really seriously select a strip till system because it mitigates some of those cool, wet, early soil conditions. I want to plant my corn early. I don't want anything to delay that corn. And that's what strip till really offers this experiment, especially because it allows corn to be planted at the same time, if not earlier even, than in the plowed system does. And before with this experiment anyway, we had to wait for a couple days before the no-till soil was more fit. And now we don't have to do that. And the same thing happens on the farm as well. If a grower doesn't have to wait for that soil to dry out, maybe it would give them a few more days of planting and higher corn yield potentials.
That was Bern Tobin of Real Agriculture talking to Dr. Dave Hooker. Sometimes I think when we're doing research over a long period of time, especially with some of the budget cuts and the questioning of where the dollars should go when it comes to research, when we have something where we've been running one research project for, say, 15, 20, 25, in this case 28 years, there's probably somebody asking, do we need to keep doing it? What is it actually telling us? And I think it really does. It really does provide value, because if there wasn't value in doing it, someone like Dave would say, hey, we really don't need to do this anymore. But what we just heard is there is still a lot of value in some of these long-term trials, like the one that he discussed. Interesting, he did mention Peter Johnson, and as Peter Wheat Pea Johnson is listening to today's show, he probably has a big smile on his face. Because what we heard from Dave Hooker there was that, sometimes wheat doesn't get the credit that it deserves when it comes to those higher soybean and higher corn yields. And quite frankly, even if you're on the prairies, it doesn't get the credit when it comes to pulses and canola and some of the interaction when it comes to yield there as well. Like, hey, if you're growing canola and canola and canola and canola, first of all, you shouldn't be doing that. But if you are in a super tight rotation, just think, if you're going like peas, canola, you're probably hurting yourself, and there probably is some studies in Western Canada to this regard. You'd be doing actually better from a yield standpoint on some of those crops that, say canola, if you've got that cereal crop like wheat in the rotation. And we can make jokes about wheat all we want, but wheat has been a profitable crop definitely at times. And hey, you look at what it's done in the past couple of years when it comes to the market shooting up and providing the returns that it has. Some people did very, very well with wheat. You just got to meet the quality, right? That's obviously a big concern. But I think, Dave, overall, whether you're farming in the U.S. or in Canada, a lot of times wheat does not get the credit, unfortunately, that it should when it comes to the yield of some of the other crops that are in the rotation. Because if wheat wasn't there, it would be a different story. Not a disaster in most cases, but it wouldn't be as good of a story. And that's really one of the keys. And this idea that we're topping out on yields, I don't know. I don't believe that. Like, I think that's sort of a defeatist giving up sort of. Look at what's happened in Ontario when it comes to the corn yield here over the past 5 years. Been blowing away records. We're talking about corn yields like that now that people are getting when we dreamed of getting them, say 10, 15 years ago. The same goes for soybeans. And wheat has continued to inch higher. Now, has it had the gains that some of those other crops have had? No. But it's a slower genetic increase, that's for sure. And think what we do to pulse yields. Think what we do to pulse yields if we solve the problem that we talked about earlier, which is, dealing with a disease like Aphanomyces. No different than if we had a solution to fusarium on wheat, right? Those would be major, major steps forward. I don't know if you call them leaps, but definitely we would see an improvement. If we found solutions to sclerotinia and canola, as an example, and in canola we definitely have had we've had genetic increase from a yield standpoint. I would say the issue has been in parts of the Western Canadian prairies has been more of a moisture has been a limiting factor when it comes to increasing those canola yields, at least over the last number of years in the short term. So interesting discussion all the way. I guess at the end of the day, I'll say it again. I think Dave Hooker is correct, and I know Peter Johnson's going to agree with me. We probably just does not get the credit it deserves when it comes to the impact that it has on the rest of the rotation. Well, we covered a lot of ground here today. I really would like your feedback. shaney@realagriculture.com is my email address. You can also, of course, find us across all the different social media platforms. You also can call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Really looking forward this week to being at the Grow Canada conference. It is happening. It actually starts tomorrow night is the icebreaker reception. It's one of my favorite things of the year to connect with people from across the industry. You can find out more by going to growcanadaconference.ca. If you're around the Calgary area and you're in agriculture, I encourage you to check out this meeting. It is fantastic. And you can join the entire industry, leaders from across the country at Grow Canada in Calgary, starting, of course, like I said, this week. And you can visit growcanadaconference.ca to find out more and register. We're going to have some coverage from the event as well. I'm also hosting one of the panels. They call it Farming 4.0. We were kind of joking. Maybe we should jump and leap ahead and say Farming 10.0. But it's going to be a really good discussion. I know we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. We're going to talk about what's happening from the machinery manufacturer standpoint from technology. We've got somebody there from John Deere. Also, Shane Thomas is going to be with us as well. Really, really high-end tech expert when it comes to agriculture. He's from Calgary, and he'll be joining me on the panel as well. I'm looking forward to moderating that group and really fresh off of Agritechnica. That's the cool part. Fresh off of Agritechnica, really, really diving into where farming of the future is going from a tech perspective, not only to increase productivity, but also to deal with things like labor costs and making improved decision-making and all that kind of stuff. And, of course, all of that has to work its way back to providing return on investment for the farmer. Because there's cool tech, right? Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, okay, yeah, so what? That's really cool, but so what, right? Does it actually provide you with increased return? That's the question that you always got to get yourself back to. I know many of you do that very, very well. So we're looking forward to the Grow Canada conference this week in Calgary. Okay, thanks everybody for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. We'll be back again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.